Welcome to Silicon Slopes Live. It's the last one of 2020, and we are glad that that is over. So we started the year in New York, ringing in the Nasdaq bell, with Mr. Clint Betts, who's the guest today. It's a little bit weird, but we have updates, and we're going to talk past, present, and future. How's it going?
It's so weird that we were in New York ringing the Nasdaq bell this year. That seems strange.
Yep. It was only 11 months ago.
It seems like that was 20 years ago.
What has transpired since?
What a year. 2020 has been nuts, right? Like if you look at, obviously COVID-19, you know about that.
A little bit.
Have you heard about that?
A little bit.
And just everything that so many companies and entrepreneurs in this community have gone through as they've tried to manage and navigate what it means to build a company, be an entrepreneur, run a business, have employees, have a family, have a life in the midst of a pandemic with presidential elections, gubernatorial elections locally, all that type of stuff. And it's been a crazy year. I mean, I'm proud of the way the Silicon Slopes community stepped up this year, though, and I think the Silicon Slopes community made a huge difference in a lot of different areas. I think in bringing testing, helping entrepreneurs with PPP loans, all sorts of things. I think the companies and the entrepreneurs and the leaders within Silicon Slopes did an excellent job.
Yep. So a lot of us were probably blacked out from March to July. What were some of the silver linings of that period for you with all we were doing?
I don't know. Yeah, that was a tough period when the community and the state and the country and the world was trying to figure out how do you respond to a coronavirus that we'd never heard of before. And, the launching of Test Utah and all the different partners and players that got involved in that. It was interesting to see how political a virus got, how political a pandemic got. It was interesting to see the way it was received, both nationally and locally, and the various ways that states and leaders responded to it. But again, I'm really proud of the Silicon Slopes community for stepping up and raising their hands and saying, if we can help, we'll try to help. And I think they've done an excellent job.
Exactly. All right, so we threaded the needle and snuck Tech Summit 2021 or 2020 in. We've also resumed our programming here just without people and started to get back into the normal cadence. How's 2021 looking for Silicon Slopes?
Well, we'll see. It's cool we have a vaccine. I think that's going to change the world, and maybe we can all get back to normal sooner than we thought. Silicon Slopes Tech Summit's not going to happen in January like it typically has. We're moving that to October. We'll have more details on that coming up. It just doesn't make sense to do a virtual Silicon Slopes Tech Summit in my mind. That event is so much about being with each other. It's so much about gathering this community together once a year. It has this family reunion feel, and have done all of that virtually or online just didn't make a lot of sense in my mind. And so we'll do it in October, and it seems like we're going to be able to get together by then as people, not just as a community. And so I think we have that to look forward to. And yeah, it's been a crazy year for Silicon Slopes, even when you take out COVID-19, right? The number of acquisitions, the number of investments that have come into our state, the struggles of a lot of companies, and the wild successes of a lot of companies. It's just been amazing.
Yeah. So come hell or high water, Tech Summit in person in October, and it'll look and feel just like it always has. Very bullish on that. In between now and then, we've got another cool event, a reincarnation of...
Yeah, we're bringing back Start Fest. Kind of where this whole thing started is Start Fest and Beehive Startups, and I think the first big event that this community ever did was Start SLC at the Depot and in downtown Salt Lake City. And I think, that spurred a lot of momentum and a lot of growth in this community, showing kind of what was possible here. And now look at us all these years later, and we're having 30,000 people show up at the Salt Palace. You have Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg here. We had Slack CEO who just got bought for $27.5 billion. He's been here. You've had Adobe CEO. I mean, you could go down the list of just the impressive folks and entrepreneurs and leaders within the tech community, not just Utah, who have come here and recognized that Utah clearly punches above its weight class when it comes to this type of stuff. And so why not bring it back and make it about Utah again? Because CLOcom Tech Summit is a national and global event that kind of just happens to be in Utah and is supported by the Silicon Slopes community, both in attendance and, a lot of the sponsorships come from there. But it's a global tech event at this point. When you get the CEO of Facebook to your event, or the CEO of Slack or Adobe, or all these companies that I mentioned, Pelotons come, all these different folks. You're a global tech event at that point. And I want StartFest to be all about Utah entrepreneurs, Utah startups, Utah businesses, and celebrate what Utah and this community has done, and get it away from the big spotlight and all the amazingness of Silicon Slopes and Tech Summit, and just celebrate Utah entrepreneurs who are building companies.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be exciting, and we are going to do that in May. So with both Tech Summit and StartFest, we're building them virtual. October is a lot more bullish as far as in person. Confident that that'll occur. So StartFest will be built to be either a virtual hybrid or in person, and it will be getting back to the roots. Back in the olden days with Start SLC and the early days of Beehive Startups, I was doing church and state, and I can't remember the first time I met you, but we did pitch competitions in a scary basement with the Gundersons. We had like gypsies doing trapeze at church and state.
Those were good times, man.
Those were. And I remember I was texting you at like 3 a.m., and you had to come get a key that I had hidden under a garbage can so you could open Church and State and do an interview with KUTV.
Not much has changed. It's how we work. That's kind of how we work now. It's like, leave you a note. You can find it underneath the garbage can, and I'll figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. Duct tape and baling wire is still an ample supply here. And we do have a few more PDFs that we can share now, but still very similar to those days. So if you look back, 5-6 years, could you have imagined Silicon Slopes as it currently sits?
Yeah. I always believed that this community, when it came together and united behind kind of one mission, one voice, one goal, could accomplish incredible things. And I think we're just getting started, to be honest with you. Like, in 2014, you looked at Qualtrics. It's kind of the first time that anyone had even heard of what Qualtrics was, even though they'd been around for 10 years at that point. They took their first initial investment from Sequoia, and that was a big deal. It was like, oh my gosh, Sequoia's investing in Utah. That's crazy. And then you had Sconard with Pluralsight. He took a big investment. And then Josh does what he always does. He took a big investment that year. I think we'll look at 2014 as the beginning of where we're at now. And in 2014, I thought we'd get here. I'm not shocked by where we're at. Qualtrics being purchased for $8 billion by SAP, Pluralsight for $3.5 billion, Domo doing extremely well in the public markets, Divvy popping up, Podium, Weave, Workfront, Pattern, all of these incredible companies in this community, MX. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of just these incredible companies. I thought Utah had it in it. I think Utah was a lot stronger than people thought in 2014. It was, back then we were being dismissed, as not an actual tech hub and a wannabe Silicon Valley and all that type of stuff. And now everybody's leaving Silicon Valley, and Utah is standing strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So in those early days, it was Beehive Startups, and similar to getting back to the roots for Start Fest, what are our plans for Beehive Startups?
I don't know. We'll see. I loved the idea of bringing StartFest back. There is a big part of me that wants to bring Beehive Startups back. I want both of those things to have the same feel that they had when they existed. There's a lot of nostalgia within Utah's tech community for those two brands and those two things. A lot of people, it wasn't just me. You mentioned the Gundersons. They played a big role in that. You played a big role in that. A lot of the venture community played a big role in Beehive Startups and StartFest, and Aaron Sconnard and Ryan and Josh. All these people played such a huge role in those early days, and it was truly community-owned. The voice was the community's voice. The goals and the intentions of it were pure, and bringing StartFest back, I want to make sure that remains true. It remains all about Utah and celebrating Utah entrepreneurship. And if we were to bring Beehive Startups back, I'd want to make sure that was true to that as well. Because when we started Beehive Startups, the whole idea was no one's telling the story of what's happening in Utah startup and tech community. No one. You couldn't get it published anywhere. I mean, all these local news outlets here, they weren't covering the biggest story in the past 20 years, is the rise of the tech industry in the state of Utah. Wasn't being covered, still not really being covered, to be honest with you. Locally, it's being covered nationally. It's not being covered locally, but in any meaningful way. There's a lack of understanding of what is happening in the tech community. There's probably a lack of understanding like what the tech community is. Certainly a lack of understanding of what Silicon Slopes is, which I've experienced over the past year, in both good and bad ways. And so, were we to bring Beehive Startups back, I would want it to tell the story of what's happening within Utah startup and tech community again, right? In an honest, upfront way that maybe Silicon Slopes can't do currently, given its stature and everything that it's focused on, and the fact that it's a nonprofit, has a 501c3, we have a 501c6, we have all these various things. Beehive Startups, we didn't give a shit about any of that stuff. None of that meant anything. I wouldn't even know what any of that stuff was back then, right? We just wanted to tell stories of entrepreneurs and startups and companies who were building interesting things and help the rest of the world understand what was happening here, and just as important, help the people who lived here understand what was happening here and make some connections. And so we'll see on Beehive Startups. We've announced StartFest. We haven't announced anything with Beehive Startups, but I think it'd be really cool to bring it back. Were it to keep that same energy and focus and intentions that it had back when it existed.
Yep, absolutely. And so along those lines of creating stuff out of the ether, it's kind of your personality as a entrepreneur, community organizer, whatever you'd like to call yourself. And you've recently launched CLOcom. And it sounds like there's some parallels of your experience up to this point as you launched that. But I know a lot of people would like to know this question, like, are you still going to stay at Silicon Slopes? And what's a general synopsis of CLOcom?
Yeah, CLOcom is going to be fun. It's similar actually in its intentions as Beehive Startups, with a lot of the lessons that we've learned with Silicon Slopes, except it's not focused on a specific region. It's not focused on a specific state, but it is focused on a specific topic, which is leadership, which is community, which is what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to be a leader, particularly in these times. And so we'll see what happens with CLOcom. I'm excited about it. We launched it just a week ago when we're recording this today. The response has been interesting and overwhelmingly positive. I've really been humbled and actually in a lot of ways shocked by the way people have responded to CLOcom. But it'll do what it does. And I love the journey of things. As you know, it's kind of the end that I hate. And so I'm excited about where it is right now, and where it'll be in the future is where it'll be. I think it'll only benefit Silicon Slopes. I'm not going anywhere, as you know. I think I love this community. I love Silicon Slopes. I love this organization that you and I have built, that so many people in this community have built, this brand, this community. It means too much to me personally to anytime soon walk away from it, or in any way give it less attention than it deserves. And it deserves a lot of attention from a lot of us, not the organization or me, you personally, or anybody here, but the idea of what Silicon Slopes can be. I mean, I think we're constantly striving as a community to live up to our best intentions and our best expectations, and we fall short at times. I think there's examples of that throughout the history of this community, and throughout the history of entrepreneurship in general. I mean, you throw things up against the wall, you raise your hand and you say, hey, I want to try this, and we're here to help, and we're here to build, and you don't always succeed in that, right? And it takes a lot of courage and bravery and whatever else, whatever adjective you want to throw in, to actually make something interesting out of this. And Silicon Slopes is now at a point where it's interesting. What's fascinating to me is all the nostalgia that exists within the community for Beehive Startups and StartFest. I was there. That sucked.
You were there, yeah.
That was really, really hard. And for a lot of that time, no one cared about what we were doing at all. And the fascinating thing now about the position we're in is that people care what we do quite a bit. And it's not as easy to throw things up against the wall and say, all right, we're going to figure this out. For sure, we're going to screw up along the way, but our intentions are pure, and we just want to figure out how to best serve this state and this community that we love. It's not as easy to do that anymore as it was with Beehive Startups, because if you failed at Beehive Startups, no one cared. Didn't matter.
Yeah, that's the way life goes. So you've interacted with a lot of good leaders over the years, probably the most famous being Zuckerberg. So with that kind of angle for CLOcom, I know you've spoken highly of Winston Churchill, but what kind of leaders do you gravitate towards, and which ones do you like to interact with and cover the most?
That's a good question. I'm fascinated by the idea of leadership, what it means to be a leader, and I'm actually as fascinated by where leaders stumble and where they fall short as where they're super successful. I've never met someone who's perfect, right? I think we idolize too much leaders. In particular, we idolize the most famous ones probably too much. We idolize politicians way too much, right? These folks who are supposed leaders within our society. What I want CEO to talk about is what it means to be a leader for yourself, for your family, for your immediate circle, for your company, for your employees, or for your community. And what does that look like, and what does that mean? And so when I think of like those types of leaders, I don't think of like the big names like Elon Musk or Zuckerberg or something, although they're incredible leaders in their own right with, flaws like all of us have. But I think of the people who are just on the ground doing it because they love doing it, and who are building something that matters to them, and they're not in the spotlight, but they're embracing the journey and just trying their best and trying to figure out how to get better every day. That's what I want CLOcom to focus on. But really, that's what I want Silicon Slopes to focus on, too, is what it means to be a leader in your own life.
Yeah. All right, well, we've covered 2020, and we've got the news announcements out for what we're planning on doing in 2021. What are you most optimistic about over the next 12 months? I
think, this has been a really hard year for this community and for the world, obviously. And in some ways, our community has been able to thrive, and we should recognize that in ways that others haven't. Like it's easier for tech companies to go remote and have their employees work from home. It's not as easy when you run a restaurant, when you run a small business that relies on people coming and walking through your door. And we as a community need to understand that. And we as a community need to figure out how we can help there and advocate on behalf of these small business owners and these small businesses who are being decimated, right? And because we've been insulated from some of that, although certainly not entirely insulated, but because it's easier for the tech community to immediately go remote, say, all right, no contact, all that type of stuff, we forget like who brings the food to us every day. Who actually, all the actual workers who make it possible for us to stay home, right? And what I'm optimistic most for the community and for the next 12 months is our ability to help those folks and help all of us come out better than this. I think what a lot of us should be thinking about as leaders within this community is the opportunity we have right now for 12 months from now to be significantly better than when all of this started. And so don't lose hope, I guess, is a big thing. I think what we're experiencing right now and what we've experienced this year has been hard, yes. It needs to be acknowledged. But also there's a lot of opportunity in here to make our community, our state, and the world a better place. There really is. I mean, I know that's idealistic. One of my concerns, which you didn't ask about, over the next 12 months is mental health in this community and broadly within the state of Utah, but specific to Silicon Slopes, mental health is, I think, the number one issue facing our community. And I think it's an issue facing a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners. This is a really, really, really hard time. If you run a restaurant and nobody can come in the door anymore because you're following the guidelines given to you by politicians, right? Yeah. And they're not bailing you out.
Right. No bailout.
The mental toll that takes on a person, on, well, I have all these employees, I have this family I need to provide for, I have all these different things. And you feel helpless, and you start to feel like there's no hope. That's a concern, and that's something that I think our community needs to rally around within, the tech community and those who run tech companies, those who are part of the tech community. Mental health has been a huge, huge, huge issue this year for our community, but we also need to think about how do we help those entrepreneurs and those small business owners and those employees who have it a million times worse than we do. And how do we, again, 12 months from now, make other people's lives better than they are now, given the situation we're in?
Yeah, good point. All right, last question. Projections and guesses on the Utah Jazz upcoming season.
Jazz are good. The Jazz are very good. We didn't get to see this team in the playoffs. They should have beat Denver. It's still hugely disappointing that we were up 3-1 and eventually lost to Denver. I think we could have made it to the Western Conference Finals. Denver did. But we didn't have Bogdanovich. We didn't have Bogey. Conley was, he had a kid in the middle of all of that, and so he missed a few of those games. The team wasn't fully in sync. I'm super. We need to keep Gobert. And now we know the owner, so maybe we can help with that. But I'm optimistic at the leap that Donovan took in the playoffs. Unbelievable. So are we the best team in the West? No, but I think we're one of the best teams in the West. I think this is as good a shot as we've had, and maybe our history as a franchise, other than the 2 finals appearances. So
there you go. There's your prediction. All right. Well, thanks for walking the 15 feet over to the stage. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite.
And that's a good bookend to 2020. Thank you, everyone, for joining.